The line of separation. During my trip to Pakistan, I was part of a large group. Each person in the group was keen to visit one place or the other in that country. Some wanted to see Takshila, others Lahore, Islamabad, or Karachi. One day we were having a discussion about this and everyone was voicing his or her opinion loudly. I noticed only Mrs. Kapoor was sitting quietly. She was a 75-year-old lady from Chennai and did not speak much unless spoken to. So, I asked if there was any place that she wanted to visit. Without any hesitation, she said, I have to visit Pindi. Where is Pindi? Is it small town or village? I don't think we will have the time to make a detour like that from a packed itinerary. Rupa smiled at my ignorance and said, I meant Rawalpindi. It is called Pindi for short for those who stay there. I was intrigued. How do you know? Have you ever stayed there? I was born and brought up there, she replied. And then slowly she told me the story of her life. She had stayed in Rawalpindi till the age of 19. When she got married and settled down in Chennai, now Chennai was her home and she could speak Tamil and make excellent Tamil dishes like puliogre and rasam, as well as any natural-born Tamilian. But she had always yearned to come back and see her childhood home if she ever got a chance. Soon we reached Islamabad and I was surprised to find it surrounded by mountains as cool as a hill station. Rupa saw my surprise and said, Islamabad is a new city. Rawalpindi is a sister city, but it is older. Islamabad was built after the partition with wide roads, shopping centers and rose gardens. Pindi is only 20 odd kilometers away from Islamabad. By now, the soft-spoken introvert Mrs. Kapoor had become quite garrulous. There was a spark in her eyes and she spoke non-stop. Many of us wanted to see Islamabad first, but she insisted on going on to Rawalpindi. She needed a companion for the trip and I volunteered to go with her. She was now quite excited and told me, I want to see the house I left 57 years ago. That's a good idea, I said. Then I remembered the lovely bouquet of flowers I had been presented on landing at Islamabad, which I was still carrying. I will present this to whoever is staying in your house now. She was touched. As the car left Islamabad airport behind, Mrs. Kapoor started pointing out the sights to me like a tour guide. She showed me an old building on the left side of the road in a crowded area and said, that used to be an electrical goods manufacturing factory. Its owner, Keval Ram Sahani, was my father's friend. My friends and I would come to this house for Lakshmi Puja during Diwali. I told the driver to slow down a little so that she could cherish the journey. The car passed Sadar Bazaar and looking at an old building with many shops, she said, here my father's cousin Ratan Sethi owned a jewellery shop, along with his partner Makbul Khan. It was known as Khan and Sethi. My wedding jewellery was made here. She continued pointing out various buildings, each holding some fond memory of her. But many a time the building she was looking for had changed to new skyscrapers and she got disoriented. Suddenly the car stopped. A tire was punctured and the driver said it would take him a while to fix it. Rupa was restless. She did not want to wait even a minute more than required. So she said, you change the tire. In the meantime, I will go and visit some of the old places. We will join you at the next main road. To go to the main road, you take a left turn and the first right turn. You wait for us there. She behaved as if she knew every inch of the area and I followed her quietly. We walked into a small lane. She explained, I have been here many times with my friends Fatima and Noor. This used to be known as Taylor's Road. My neighbor Makbul Khan's wife, Mehrunisa Chachi, was an expert in designing new embroidery patterns. We used to come and give the designs. Come, we will take a shortcut. That is where my uncle lived. By now, she was talking more to herself and making her way with ease through the narrow lanes. We went to the next road. There were old houses on the road and she went into the first huge bungalow. She said, This was my uncle Motiram Rai's house, and the next house was that of Allah Baksh. They were great friends and loved each other. I still remember whenever Allah Baksh Chacha planted a tree in the house, my uncle would plant the same. This mango tree here was planted on a Basant Panchami day. There was so much joy in both houses. My grandmother prepared kheer and sent me to Allah Baksh's house with a jug full of it. While I was carrying the jug, I bumped into a young man and the hot kheer fell on his feet. I was so scared and embarrassed. Did you know him? No, not then, but later I married him. She then looked up at the tree and said, "This has become so old now." We walked in through the gate. There was no one around and I was afraid we would be stopped by someone for trespassing, but Rupa was least bothered. It was as if she was in a world of her own. She walked to the backyard while I stood hesitating in the front. A couple walked in and were visibly surprised to see a stranger standing in their garden, that too in a sari. It was also just then I noticed a board hanging in front of the door. It said, "Dr. Salim and Dr. Salma, dentist." I started apologizing and explained the situation to them. Their faces lost the look of suspicion as soon as I finished my story. Rupa was still looking at all the trees and remembering her childhood. The couple welcomed us courteously. "Please sit down. Do join us for a cup of tea." They pulled up 2 chairs. By now, I was feeling very awkward, disturbing them in the morning, but Dr. Salim said, "Please sit. We are glad you came." Our grandparents too were from Surat in Gujarat. They emigrated to Pakistan and I was born and brought up here. My parents talked with great nostalgia about Surati farsan, Parsi, Dhansak and Khakra. Just to make conversation, I said, "It must be difficult maintaining such a large bungalow now." Dr. Salim replied, "We moved to this house some years back. You see, this house happens to resemble the one my parents lived in Surat, and they made me promise that I would not break it and make apartments as long as I stayed here. Allah has been kind to us and we don't need the money. Our neighbor Allah Baksh's children sold their property long back and now there is a commercial complex." By then Rupa had finished wandering in the garden and I formally introduced her to the couple. She asked if she could see the house from the inside. Dr. Salim agreed happily. After we purchased their house 10 years ago, we made very few modifications. "It is perhaps in the same state as you last saw it," he said. I walked in with Rupa. She looked into the main room and said, "This was where my grandfather used to sit and control the house." Then she pointed to a colored glass door and said, "Allah Baksh's wife had painted it for them. That was the window through which she would send dry fruits to my aunt. That was where we used to fly kites." Every brick, every wall held a memory for her. Finally, I reminded her that it was time we left. We walked back to the garden and said our goodbyes to the couple. Dr. Salim handed us a packet. "There is no time for you to eat, but I cannot send 2 elders away without offering anything. Please take this, and if God is willing, we will meet again." We came out of the house, and when we reached the main road, the car was there. Having followed Rupa's directions, now she wanted to see her own house. She told the driver, "Take a right turn from a chauraha. I know the way. The first building on the right side is Al-Amin School for Girls, and a little farther there is a Jesus and Mary convent. A little ahead on the left there is a government boys' school. Next to that is the Idgah Maidan. Next to that is a lane with 5 huge bungalows. Each plot is an acre in size. The first one belonged to Keval Ram, second to Mia Mehboob Khan, and the third one to Sardar Supreet Singh. Fourth one to Rai Sahib, and the fifth was ours." She talked on and the driver followed her directions. She was mostly right. Yes, the red brick building on the right was the Al-Amin School for Girls. The Jesus and Mary convent was now a Loyola college and the government boys' school had become a degree college. The Idgah Maidan was not there. Instead, there was a shopping complex. The 5 beautiful bungalows she described were also missing. Instead, there was a mass of shops, hotels, and a video libraries piled next to each other. Rupa became upset. Madam, are you sure it is in the same road? The driver asked politely. Of course, I'm sure. I was born here. I spent 19 years here. You were not even born then. How can I make a mistake? She told him to stop the car and got off to search. She was sure the house was still there, behind the new buildings. She was possessed, as if searching for a lost child or a precious jewel. My house was yellow in color and there were 2 stories. It had an entrance from the right side. From my house, I could see the Idgah Maidan. 2 years back, a friend of mine who also stayed here came to see the place and she told me the house was still very much here. She turned to me and continued, You know, once I had unknowingly walked on the wet cement floor near the entrance of the house and my footmark stayed there forever. My father wanted to keep it as a reminder of me after I got married and went away. I can recognize my house without any trouble, but there was no house of the description in that area. With the footmark in the entrance, I knew by this time that the house was not there, but Rupa was reluctant to accept it. We stood in front of the building where she said her house used to be. It was a hotel and a chowkidar was sitting at the entrance. I asked him, How old is this hotel? He got up and replied, It is only a year old. How long have you been working here? Ever since the building was demolished and construction started. Rupa was quiet now. Was there a 2-story yellow building here with the entrance on the right and footprints along the portico? Yes, there was a building like that, but I don't remember the footprints. Now I knew that Rupa's house had been demolished to make way for this hotel. I looked at the chowkidar and told him that was my friend's house. Oh, please come inside. So what if your house is not there? The hotel stands on the same land. I'm sure my owner will be happy to receive you. Have a cup of tea and a samosa. I looked at Rupa, but she was not listening to our conversation. She took a handful of soil from the little patch of garden in front of the hotel and said, This is my land. This is my soil. My ancestors made this their home. They were born and burnt here. The land, the trees, the air, the water, everything was ours. We knew the customs, the culture, and the food. One day, one person drew a line and created 2 nations, and suddenly we became foreigners in our own land. We had to live and adopt some other place whose language, food, and culture were alien to us. A single line made me a stranger of my own land. People who have been uprooted feel a special pain which no one else can understand. I was quiet. I could only imagine her agony. I held her hand and suddenly realized that the bouquet of flowers I had meant to give to the owners of her house was lying on the front seat of the car, withering slowly in the December sunshine.